Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to the Master series, in which I will cover the analysis of the round number 6 from the Roquetas Chess Festival. As you may know from the previous episode, I just lost a round number 5 in a painful, quiet way, let's say, and in the previous day I managed to score only half a point out of 2 games with white pieces, so not an ideal scenario. Not only that, I knew that this time I will be playing with black pieces, and I got paired with even stronger opponent because, guys, there is the Grandmaster. And you may say that, okay, Grandmaster rated so low means that he's past his prime, he's not that good player, so it's a good pairing for me. By looking at the pairings itself, I felt the same. However, when I looked up at the guy, I saw that only recently he dropped so much, and overall level of his play is not that low. So I am playing black pieces with the Grandmaster after a loss, so not a good scenario. However, I was trying to give my best, and I had finally a rest during the morning because finally it was not a double round. So hopefully it was the time for me to get my battery higher, and yeah, let's see if it worked out. As you may remember from the round number 1, I played with black pieces 2 against the Catalan, and in here it's no difference because c4, e6, g3 happens, so exactly the same as in the round number 1. My first game though was not on the live stream, live coverage, live board, so I'm not sure if my opponent managed to see that game and then decided because of that to play the same line, or maybe there was completely different reason for it. But here we go, we are playing the same opening, so I opted for the same line, waiting to see what my opponent has planned against me. So I played the d5 and I then took on the c4 quite early, and the only new move was on the move number 8 because in the previous game, as you may remember, my opponent did not go for the knight c3 line in here, and my opponent now did. The difference between this line and the line chosen during the first round, in which I believe castle was played, if I'm not mistaken, allowing me to play b5 and then a4 happened, something along those lines. In knight c3, I am actually not allowed to play b5. The point being that knight covers the d5 square, so after a usual knight e5, which might be a threat, I would have had the knight d5 move, but now I don't, and that's the problem. Therefore, before I will play b5, I need to play another preparing move, which is queen c7, and actually I'm not sure if I ever phrased the knight c3 move. Therefore, I just by chance looked those variations up just before the game, and I knew that queen c7 is the move here, thankfully, because without it, I might have at least spent some time in order to uh, discover that queen c7 is a good move, and there was also a chance that I will not discover that. Thankfully, though, as I've said, I checked the line, but after d4, the problem with checking the line was that I saw the b6 move, which I chose in the game. However, b5 in here was still the move to go for, and I'm not even sure why didn't I do it. I believe it was maybe due to some d5 possibilities, which first of all I don't like to face. Second of all, I saw that my opponent is willing to play that move if possible, and third of all, computer suggested it, so maybe during the preparation I felt like I don't want to go for it and opted for b6, but b6 has another drawback of being simply more passive, and therefore maybe not a good choice in this specific game. Nevertheless, it's still a theory, and I knew that after bishop f4 I should reply with bishop d6 and go for the bishop exchange, and after rook d1 from my opponent, I already knew that something might be like wrong from his standpoint because I did not see such move in my preparation. I saw, I believe, mostly castle with the idea of placing the rook from f1 to d1, maybe rook from a1 to c1, and this should be a better version for white. Because if the rook from a1 goes to d1 as of now, this rook, even after castling, might be out of place, to be honest. So I felt like, okay, this might be wrong. However, obviously there is some pressure on the d file, so I had to figure out is it a problem or not. And I felt, okay, it shouldn't be any problem because I can simply play bishop b7 as I would always like to play, and after any dc I can recapture with the queen, no problems whatsoever. Therefore my opponent opted for castle, I replied with the same, and now he pushed e4, which seemed like a logical try because as of now e5 is a threat, and I need to perhaps go away with the queen, but I did just that, so no worries at all. One thing to note is that in such scenarios in which the bishops are looking at each other and the queen is looking there were plenty of games in my career, unfortunately also classical ones, in which I blundered a sequence similar to the one that I will just show you. So dc, queen c5, and some rook d7. This is just for the, showing the idea purpose, because now without the knight on f6, I blundered a few times the knight g5 move, threatening with the checkmate and threatening with taking the bishop or sometimes the rook. There were two instances in the classical games that I did that, and I was losing the game, so I had, thought about it during this particular game, and I spotted that, okay, in here actually I'm fine because I can just simply capture the knight and I'm winning, but I had to keep an eye on that possibility too. e4 was played though, and after that move I chose to play cd. I had to have in mind the e5 move because it's a tactical threat, because I have to take with the knight, and after knight d4, even though I am temporarily a pawn up, there might be maybe something there, but I mean I'm the one to move now, right? So in the end I didn't find anything specific for the opponent, and if that's the case, cd works just fine. As of now, opponent had a choice of taking with either the rook or the knight. Both were fine. He opted for rook d4. I went back with the queen. Rook f2 d1 was played, so in the end the rook actually has the place to go for. Fine, but I still believe that this rook would be better placed on c file, so that white fights for both files. Nevertheless, the d file for me, from my perspective, is lost. I need to figure out, okay, what to do. And I decided that if d file is gone, I might as well try to fight for the c file. That's why I opted for rook a to c8 move. Queen e2 was a logical follow-up reply, and now I was kind of stuck because it's a critical moment for me. I don't know, should I play rook f2 e8, f2 d8, maybe should I push b5, maybe e5, maybe knight e5 is the way to go. Or maybe if I'm not sure what to do, let's just play h6 and wait. So plenty of possibilities, not so many differences between them, and that's the type of position in which I guess I might struggle and my opponent, since he's a grandmaster, may not, and I have to choose something. So even though I knew that knight e5 was one of the moves I saw in my preparations, I very much doubted that actually in here it can work, because simply my opponent can take, play f4, and then e5, grabbing a lot of space activity, so no use of that. So since that's the case, I was leaning more towards the e5 move myself. It has a drawback though of giving up the d5 square for the knight jumps or something, so yeah, pretty unsure what to do yet, and therefore I am really happy with the move I in the end found, because I've played rook f2 e8. It might seem that it's not that great though, because, well, what is the point of having the rook behind the pawn that have no opportunity to go away from the file? But the point was that e5 as of now from the opponent's perspective will not work, simply because I can take on f3, then on e5. And it was kind of a waiting move, but I guess it was better than h6. And this rook might be helpful in here sometimes in the variations of e5, knight c5, knight e6, knight d4, and some exchange at the end, because then if the pawn actually ever leaves the e-file, my rook is ready to fight for the pawn or something like that. So more of a long-term move, that's why I'm happy with that. And I was even more happy since my opponent at this point spent I don't want to lie and I don't have the correct like time as of now, but maybe around half an hour or even longer with what to do. And the move that he found is the one that perhaps would never cross your mind, especially when I mentioned that it took him like half an hour to do that. But he played knight e1. So, when you are a player as weak as myself, playing a grandmaster, and after half an hour he plays a move like that, you need to think, okay, it's not anything stupid, it has something behind it, some deep, deep thought, and my goal was to try to work it out. Did I manage to do so? We'll see. However, I knew that I cannot underestimate such move. And I believe I cracked the code, meaning that I kind of knew what opponent is trying to accomplish. So I thought that his goal is to maneuver the knight through c2 to e3, so that he will be always better prepared for any e5 coming from my perspective. And also at some points, if I am not willing to push e5, and then the knight would actually have this amazing route to d5 square. If I will not push e5, my opponent will try to do that. So jumping back with the knight is allowing e5 to be pushed. So doesn't matter if I will push e5 or if he will do so. Knight e1 is useful move in both those variations, so very nice one. And that's why I guess I couldn't handle the pressure and I pushed e5 eventually. I believe that in here, since the knight is as of now gone, I had an opportunity to play knight e5, which during the game I didn't really thought that much about. The point is that since there is no knight trade and there is no queen then to be harassed by the f4 pawn, if now my knight is attacked with f4, I can jump back to c6. So I am maneuvering my knight to a better square with a tempo to the rook, and this tempo allows me to play e5 after wherever the knight goes. Like, okay, rook d2, fine, e5, rook d6, e5. And that's why I don't allow e5 from my opponent's perspective. And in here, obviously, position might sharpen up, but it's a good scenario for me overall. However, in the game, as I've said, I've played e5 immediately, and after rook d2, I decided to play a knight c5, and knight c2 was an obvious way from the to reply from my opponent. And now is the question of, okay, how can I proceed? Because knight e6, knight d4 seem fine, but I was just I feel like not prepared to do that, because after knight e3, also opponent has a like question to answer. Does he want to keep the knight here to block my knight d5 jump, knight d4 jump, or does he not care and go for the knight d5 himself? But as of now, in this scenario, I believe that knight d5 would be annoying. And the point is that after knight d5, e5, knight d4 takes, opponent can go with the queen like wherever and then take my pawn, and this one will survive. And this was annoying, therefore, even though I am like willing to play knight e6 and d4, I'm actually not allowed to do that because of the concrete variations. And since that's the case, in here I decided, okay, if I cannot do my maneuver that I wish I would be able to play, maybe I can stop this maneuver from being played, or this one, or this one. So yeah, plenty of jumps from the e3 square. So my thoughts were like going around back and forth between b5 and g6 moves, because in that way I'm covering this square, in that way that square, and plenty of nuances. I'm not sure if I want to get into those, because I'm not sure if I even remember them all correctly. And not only that, it's quite late when I'm recording this. Nevertheless, one thing I might point out is that after, for example, b5, I didn't like the b4 move. Seemed counterintuitive, that's why I want to include it in the video, because after knight e6, knight d5, takes, knight d4, takes. Once more, it's basically the same scenario in which queen can go wherever she wants, and then rook d4 will follow up. And that's why in here I would rather take with the bishop, because in that way it's a little bit different scenario, because I might try to put some pressure to the d5 pawn from the other perspective, and with this bishop I would be completely lost long term. With the knight against the bishop, maybe it's not as bad, but well, who am I like kidding, right? Even the variations like that occurred to me, and before pawn is protected. So yeah, overall I would be really having a tough time here. So yeah, all in all things considered, I decided to play a quiet move of rook c to d8. C-file, I wanted to fight for it, but the queen is gone, the white queen I mean, and there is not that much going on this file, so I decided to play move like that. And now yet another time when my opponent spent quite a lot of it trying to figure out what to do. I expected mostly knight d5 because, as you may know from my previous analysis, I nearly always consider all the forcing stuff most concrete one, and sometimes I am, omitting the more calm approach. So knight d5 was the top choice of mine, after which I would decide once more to give up the bishop, because after e4 move I knew I would spice things up a lot. However, I hoped that the white bishop will not be as powerful, and my knight might have been just that. So we would see. Obviously, the game is becoming pretty unbalanced here, so we would see what would go on. However, my opponent decided to take on d8 first and only then play knight d5. My plans did not change much, so I took and played e4 anyway. In here knight e3 was played, so the move that I was expecting sooner or later, actually it was played later than I thought. Nevertheless, it's an annoying move, but now not due to the fact that the knight can jump here or there, because d5 is blocked, f5 is not supported, c4 makes no sense to be honest, but because of the fact that the knight jumping from c2 allows the opponent to put any heavy piece on the c file, trying to this time use the c file for white's own sake. So it's pretty funny how the dynamic changes on those two open files, c and d1. So that was more or less the case, and in here I had the critical moment for myself, once more debating, should I play this, should I play this, maybe I can even try a move like, I don't know, h5, which seem computer-ish, but due to lack of other opportunities, maybe that was something I can consider. Obviously my idea would be to mostly block the pawn with some rook d6, queen d6 moves, so that's why those two comes in hand, because they are covering the entry points for the knight to attack the d6 square. So yeah, once more pretty similar dilemma to the one I've had before, and once more I was pretty undecided what to do. However, I found a variation. Problem was that I've miscalculated it, and in general this position and the moves that are following are kind of a downfall in this game from my perspective, because I was missing far too many obvious things. So cutting to the chase, going into the game, my choice was to play b5 in order to both fight for the c4 square, and then after queen c2 was played and expected, I can play queen b6 going away from the c file, because I created the b6 square for the queen. And after b4, my initial idea was to play knight d3, and from the distance I went into the calculation, and I felt confident about it, and I felt like after bishop e4 I can play knight takes f2, very nice looking move, trying to disrupt the whole solid position of the white king and make use actually of this queen. One thing, and an easy thing that I've missed from the distance though, is that after bishop h7, which is an intermediate move aiming to run away from with the bishop from the knight's attack, I can take the bishop, but it was not my point, because after king f2 I wanted to have the knight there in order to deliver the fork together with the pin and so on. So I wanted to play king h8 here simply, and from the distance I only saw king f2, after which I'm winning because I play knight d4 and all that stuff. But obviously in here there is a simple queen f2, which I missed from the distance and I shouldn't have. And the problem is that, well, queen covers the diagonals, so there is no knight g4, no pin, no fork, whatever. And since that's the case, I actually have to accept the bishop on h7 now. And even though in here I might have some counterplay due to this disrupted pawn, disrupted king's safety, I am a pawn down and it's not easy to continue, and I wanted to have something concrete. And apparently computer likes my situation, because I can either try to play knight f6, focus on the pawn, or play knight g5 actually, trying to go for the fork, another one, and use the other white squares. Nevertheless, I didn't see that much potential in here, and also I was frustrated with myself after b4, because when I was recalculating stuff, I spotted queen f2, I got disgusted with myself that I didn't see it earlier. Therefore, I just dismissed the whole variation and knight f2 idea, when I shouldn't have. That's the problem. I mean, not knight f2, but knight d3, let's say, because in here I don't have to go for knight f2. One more thing that I've missed is that I can simply take the b4 pawn that is not protected. So yeah, I'm not sure for which variation and miscalculation I'm more mad at myself. Is it this one or the queen f2 one? But the point is that at this point of the game I did not see much, unfortunately. And for all those reasons, after b4 I then ended up playing knight a4, which is considered a blunder by the computer, even though from the human perspective, okay, it's not like the best looking move, but it's not the worst either. However, in here there is a pretty nice variation that both myself and my opponent missed, because I was actually hoping to get d6, which computer considers as the best move, because I felt like this pawn might be not defendable really. So I was planning on playing g6 in order to create at least some breathing space for my king and take away the f5 square. And after queen c7, which is natural, I wanted to play rook d7 with the idea that if ever queen b6 happen, okay, this pawn is a passer, but as of now I am blocking it amazingly, and I have few possibilities to try to attack it, right, with knight e8, knight c8, knight c4 maybe. So all in all, I calculated that stuff and I felt all right, should be good. However, the move that I've missed, and I believe my opponent missed too, because otherwise he would go for such line, is knight d5. Very nice looking move. And the point is that well, I am hit like in all my weak spots, let's say. And if I accept the queen, dc is the move. And yeah, I don't have anything to play really, because the promotion is threatening. And if I want to cover it like in any way, my opponent can do like many things. He can try to take my knight, then maybe protect the pawn and promote it. I believe also a move like that would be good enough. Computer maybe dislike it because there are plenty of better options, but just to show the potential of the c pawn, this is the variation that you may consider. So not an easy way to win the game for white, to play such move, to leave the queen under the attack. Therefore, that's why it was missed by both sides. Nevertheless, one very nice looking move that I wanted to show you guys. Going back to the game though, as I've said, d6 did not happen, but rook c1 happened. Also a good move. What can I play? In here I decided to go with the g6 move. Once more, creating breathing space for the king, taking away the f5 square. Knight d5 is really like out of question. Okay, I am getting rid of the passer and I will not get checkmated because I can cover the check, fine. But the problem was a little bit bigger, I would say, because after bishop e4, the 8th rank is not the only problem. I have the problem here and here. The position is open, the bishop will be better than the knight, so practically I have like no chances. Therefore I decided to at least keep those pawns, play g6 and see what happens. And the point was that after bishop e4 and my pawn being closed anyway, I have queen d4 reply with the double attack, and after bishop f3 I can take the pawn. So at least as of now I am not yet down on the material, let's say. Queen c7 was expected, and in here once more the brain fog, let's say, because I've calculated like so much stuff and variations. All of them were wrong, because I was debating between queen d6, rook d6, rook d7, maybe something else too, but I doubt it. Yeah, so those were, I guess, two three main choices, and I opted for rook d7 because I felt like, okay, queen c8, I will happily give up the pawn because at least I am then getting sound counterplay. My knight gets back to the game. I hit the c1, I hit the f2, my queen is active, all that stuff. But yeah, I've spent so much time on it, and then queen c8 did not happen because queen e5 happened. I didn't see that move, and calculating one move ahead should be a must at my level. And yeah, once more during the same game, I miss an obvious move. Why is it obvious? Because queen gets activated to the perfect square, hitting on the lines, on the diagonals, and all that stuff, and the rook opens up to go there and to basically nearly checkmate me. And the case is too that after king g7, which I was like, I nearly played, and there is queen g5 move with the knight f5 idea, and I'm basically lost. I can resign. So yeah, pretty bad sequence from me, and the only move that I found in the end was queen b2, and it's a desperate choice really, because whenever you have such a disastrous position with the passer on the opponent's behalf and all the activity and all that stuff, you don't want to go into the lost endgame. However, I tried that, and thankfully it kind of worked, because in here white is winning because of rook c8, king g7, queen g5 once more, and I can resign. Obviously, I can fight, like maybe deliver the check, cover the f5 square, and hit the queen, but long term I should be just simply lost. Nevertheless, in the game it did not happen because opponent took on b2, and idea is simple, like knight b2, rook c6, and I have to go back with the knight or play king g7. I'm losing the pawn. So my opponent decided, okay, now it's the time to cash in and take my advantage. But in the end game, I might have some practical chances. However, for example, I cannot like follow Stockfish, let's say, since he is recommending some move like knight d6, trying to get the knight back into the game. And if the exchanges are possible, go for the exchanges, right? So bishop e2, hitting the pawn. And now I can play knight b2 c4, which I saw during the game, but after takes, rook c6, like c3, like a4, the pawn goes up, my pawn is lost. Like, I cannot ever save this game. Simple as that. So Stockfish likes it, I don't, and I still feel like my choice in the game was better practically, even though it blundered yet another pawn, because I opted for f5, trying to get some space, make things easier, not easier, spicier, and yeah, something like that, and making way for my king to activate itself. And only now I would be thinking about knight d6 and trying to create any kind of fortress. The problem though was that after rook a8, king f7, knight f5 was played, very nice move, making use of this pawn that was overextended, because now if I take, bishop h5 happens and I'm losing the material. So my opponent saw everything, I saw nearly nothing. I am not lost yet, but very close to it. And at this point, I don't have anything better than to accept the knight. One variation, though, that I felt like at the beginning my opponent might have missed is knight c7, because I'm running away from the attack and I'm attacking the rook, keeping the pressure there. But after rook a7, gf, there is d6, making use of the spin. So nearly there, but still not there. I would be losing here. Therefore, I decided to, at that point, simply take the knight. After a check, go up with the king, and then take on d5. The one thing that I was hoping to get in general in this position was the activity. Because if you think about it, I am only a pawn down on the king side. My rook and the knight might cooperate somehow, and I might just be able to save somehow with the practical problems if I create them and so on. But in order to do that, I have to be precise, and I was not, because my opponent went with bishop b8, natural move. However, now I could have played rook d1, rook d2, and if my pawn is lost in any way, I have knight d1, and then what's important is that I would be taking the pawn with a check. So even if like a4 is played, rook f2, king g1, rook a2, I am holding this pawn. I took this one. Now the king has opened up. I can try to deliver threats like, for example, knight e3, rook g2, and then checkmate patterns. So for example, I will show you guys like rook a8, knight e3, rook b8, check here, and then I can just, I don't know, go back, threaten with the checkmate and all that stuff. So this would be the way to go. I wanted to achieve basically the same thing. However, I forgot to deliver the check. So I went with rook d2 immediately, and then after bishop b5, knight d1, opponent went with a4, and the difference is that king is on g1 instead of on g2. So that was my blunder, let's say, because it was actually very good practical chance for me. And as of now, rook takes f2, it's not even working tactically because of rook d8, and I'm hit there and there, and I'm losing material. So I have to take with the knight. So I'm losing like the momentum, the real chances, let's say. Nevertheless, still fighting. My opponent went with a5, knight g4 happened, and then the idea is to play knight e3. But look at this, guys. I could have had knight e3 with like one move, and now I'm getting it with like three of them. So the pawn is, going further and further, and this is why this position is not so great. My opponent was also very precise because he played rook f8 check. Very important check to give because it's having an eye on the f5 pawn. And even though I don't care about the pawn itself, I care about the fact that losing it would mean that the rook might help the king in terms of the defense. And since that's the case, I can't really allow that. And yeah, after the check, which was a very important move, I played king g6, and then my opponent played yet another one, bishop e8. Actually, this is the combo of two only moves winning for white. So very nice by my opponent, very nice find. King g7 now, and I gave up the pawn. The point is that after king g5, there is h4, and it may seem okay. It's a weakness, right, on g3, but I was really willing to create some checkmate patterns and threats to the white king, and with the h pawn being up, it's no longer a possibility. So I didn't want to allow that. I went down with the idea that after rook f5, I have knight e3, and after rook goes wherever, somewhere, I can try to do this trick and all that stuff. So one more thing I would like to mention is that if my opponent, let's say, if I played here and he took and I played like that, I had the possibility nearly of having an opportunity like that because I'm hitting the bishop, threatening with checkmate. However, with this amazingly placed rook on f3, my knight is hanging, so I can't have them all, right? I cannot attack the bishop, threaten with checkmate, and protect my knight. I can't do all that on my own with only a rook, and that was the problem. That's why I went with this move, hoping that at least I will, hold the pawn a little bit longer. But as I've said, bishop e8 was fine. Here, here, here. Rook f7, also very good move because it makes my king go to the g8 square, white square. So whenever my opponent will feel a need to give me additional check with the bishop, he will be allowed to do that. So very nice in between check. And for example, if the check was not included and rook f3 would happen, I would give a check, king h1, rook e2. This time I don't care about attacking the bishop because the bishop is safe anyway. So all I care about is to protect my knight and create a checkmate threat. And after h4, I saw the knight c4 opportunity, and that is what is not working if my king is there because of bishop f7 double attack. With my king on g7, it would be opportunity. And I thought that I'm actually drawing here because I discovered the attack to the bishop. I'm hitting the pawn. There is no way for the bishop to protect the pawn. And then I can defend 1 against 2 on the king side. But only during the analysis, computer showed that I am still losing because after bishop b5, I am temporarily pinned. In order to get away from the pin, I have to give a check. And after this check, king goes like whatever. And I cannot really take the pawn because of very nice geometric stuff. Rook a4, rook a3, my knight is kind of stuck. and I have to go to b7, rook a7, pinning the knight, and if I go rook e7, bishop c6, and I'm losing the knight and the game anyway. However, as you can tell, not an easy geometry, not an easy variation. At least it gave me some hope for the better future. My opponent crushed those hopes with the rook f7 in between check. I went to g8, rook f3 happened, and basically we repeated the variation. So I gave a check, he played there, rook e2. But now, since after h4 I don't have knight c4 as I've mentioned, I had to switch the idea, and I went with the rook e1 check, knight f1 check, and in here my opponent um, not have to, but should go to the g2 square, which he in the end went for. And after knight d2, I'm nearly there, right? I'm hitting the rook, I'm hitting the bishop, so nearly there. The problem is that after rook f2, I have to care about the knight. Such endgames will never be okay because the rook will stand behind the pawn will continue advancing, and it's just a bad placement for my rook. But I can try to get such rook endgames with my rook being better placed as a, let's say, last chance to survive. But also, obviously, I would like to rather keep the knight on the board if I can make some use of it. And I nearly was able to do so because after knight e4, rook a2 was played, and I was like, wait, am I like even winning? Because my knight c3 can happen, right? I'm hitting once more the rook and the bishop, but yeah, rook a3, calm as that, and even if I include a move like knight b1, rook a1, so even though the bishop is hanging basically all this time, I cannot do much about it because also my knight is under constant threat. And for that reason I decided against including the knight b1 move, and as the last chance to survive the game, because actually if I now don't take the bishop and jump with the knight somewhere else than b1 and so on, a pawn is just pushing, obviously after, you know, making the bishop safe. So yeah, I just decided that I can take the bishop, give up the knight, and give a check, very important move, in order to place my rook in a much better place than in here, let's say, because now my rook is active and my opponent's rook is not. And I had like some hopes that this endgame might be a drawish one, but as you can tell from the eval bar, it's not. So it's funny that you know, as a human beings we have those hopes and ideas in mind, and then computer engine just says whatever, what are you thinking about, it's -5 or +5 all the time. So yeah, I thought like I was fighting, but the fight is like not even there, to be honest. Nevertheless, I believe that I gave my best during this span of the last like 10 or maybe 20 moves with this rook endgame with the light pieces. This is the best I could have gotten out of it. It's losing, so well, it's life. I still tried a little bit, so I, you know, cut away the king. I then wait with my king here on the king side and so on. But my opponent just simply were pushing a little bit, making his position better and all that stuff. For a second though, I felt like I might have some Zugzwang possibilities and then stalemate ones, like, because in here after rook a3, the king has nowhere to go, the pawn cannot push, and the rook can only stay there, and then I can go like this, so maybe there is something there. But well, it's just a dreaming, right? Because my opponent can simply give a check, create opportunity to push the pawn forward. So if I go down, he go here, then here, then here, and if I go up, rook h7 is the simplest way of all, because I cannot take the pawn because the pawn is taken and my rook is taken. And that's exactly the moment in which I resigned, because there is no point to continue against the Grandmaster. I am shown that he has everything under control, and yeah, due to this fact I felt like it's exact moment where I should resign, and I did that. So as you can tell, guys, quite a painful day, again after another painful one before. So half a point out of 3 games, not ideal. Sure, I faced better opponents, but I hoped for the outcome to be better. My overall play was not that bad, but after such results, my confidence were really low. I also knew that in the future games I will be paired with lower rated opponents, so it was quite annoying. Nevertheless, you know, you have to take it, and yeah, that's that for this game. Hopefully you like that, and even if you don't, I hope that you will give me a like under this video as a cheer up after this loss, and we'll see you tomorrow on during the another analysis of yet another game from this tournament. Few more to come. Even though it's painful to see such loss, I guarantee that the next video will be all about the dynamic, fun chess. So stay up for it, and thank you all for watching this one. We'll see each other shortly. Bye bye.